Harden is obviously a name that is out there. He's actually been linked to the Raptors. I've heard like him and the Raptors and the Celtics are players there, and obviously the Brooklyn Nets and the 76ers. Um, do you
Another,
feel like he'll get traded before the season? Because that's the thing everyone wants to know.
I think he's going to get traded kind of near the start of the season. I don't know if it'll be like right before, but there's so many talks going on right now. Apparently the Sixers have been willing to include Ben Simmons in the trade packages for Harden, which I think is a huge progression on that front. I also stumbled upon a rumor yesterday that the Denver Nuggets are actually jumping kind of close to the forefront of the Harden trade talk as well. Apparently the package from Denver would include something for like Jamal Murray, Michael Porter Jr., and like draft picks, which is honestly a pretty good package in my head, like if you're talking about it. I think for the Raptors, it's a tough call whether or not you should pursue Harden. I mean, obviously on my channel, like I did a video talking about whether or not the Raptors should go after Harden, and I really undersold how much the Rockets were kind of going with like the asking price for what they thought James Harden was worth. I thought something around like Kyle Lowry and like somebody like Terrence Davis or something like that, like potentially get it done. But it seems like they're going to be asking for way more. I think I actually saw the story on your Instagram page where the package would have to include something like Pascal Siakam and Norman Powell probably in it, which is it's a pretty big asking price. So like
Yeah, I saw that same Denver Nuggets thing. I don't know how credible it is. Some people say it's credible. Some people are like, "Oh, it's just a made-up rumor." Like you can't always believe everything. But I heard like the Rockets are like trying. They're doing West teams and East teams, so I think they're just trying to get like the best package possible.
I think at this point they realize that James Harden just does not want to be there, which is a shame. I think they've done a decent job kind of throughout his time in Houston surrounding him with talent, but like it's just come to the point where I don't feel like you want to have a player on your roster that just doesn't want to be on that team, because that's just going to bring down the mood in the locker room. That's going to kill team chemistry. It's better for the Rockets at this point to just move on from James Harden and start over.
Yeah, I would agree, but I'm just wondering for James Harden actually because I might be alone in this, but I kind of like what the Rockets did this offseason actually because they're kind of like a big what if team, you know what I mean? It's like Westbrook is definitely the more sure thing than John Wall because he's been out for like 2 years. But when they're both healthy, I actually like John Wall a little bit better than Russell Westbrook. So it's kind of like a chance. And then obviously Cousins, and then they added Christian Wood, who was like amazing down the stretch for the Pistons. I kind of like their team, honestly. I would want to see what they could do before moving Harden if I was them.
I mean, okay, here's my thing with John Wall. If we're talking about like the version of John Wall we saw before he got injured, what I like about the fit with John Wall, with Westbrook at least, is he's a good defender. He's a very good passer. My big issue here is that before he went down with injury, John Wall had like the highest usage rate out of like any player in the league, even higher than Westbrook and Harden, who were on their own teams at that time, which I don't know how great that blends with James Harden's game, but I do kind of see the fact that John Wall at this point is probably a better outside shooter than Russell Westbrook is. So in terms of that fit, like it does work a little bit better. I just think, honestly, like if you're asking me, I think the Rockets right now are in a position where they should do something akin to what the Oklahoma City Thunder have done and just tear everything down, get as many draft picks as you can get, and just start over, because you don't have a lot of assets right now in terms of draft capital if you're the Rockets. And James Harden is like 31 years old, I think. So he's not on his way out, but like he's getting up there in years. So like you got to think like you're only really going to have so many windows, and whatever way you look, like to win with James Harden, and whatever way you look at least for this season, I honestly don't see that Houston team, even in a best case scenario, being better than the Lakers to make it out of the West, So like if I'm Houston, and if we're talking about Toronto specifically here, that you're looking for a package, I think somebody like Siakam, Powell, and maybe like one of the younger guys like Terrence Davis, plus like obviously draft picks to go in that. Like if you have that offer on the table, I would look long and hard up like at that. If you're Houston, I think if you're Toronto, I like getting James Harden back, but I think that deal would have to include PJ Tucker for me as well. Like if you want to accept that, because I think obviously if
The
you're
Raptors would be so small. They're already small already.
I think the thing there for me is if you're giving up Siakam, like you want, Tucker to just be an immediate replacement at that four spot. And I hear you on the fact that they're small, but I think somebody like OG Anunoby in last year's playoffs showed that he can really be a pretty damn good like small ball big. So I wouldn't be too concerned about that. My biggest thing for the Raptors in the Harden scenario is if they're bringing Harden into the mix, you almost kind of have to assume that they make another deal after that, because at that point they're gonna have James Harden, they're gonna have Kyle Lowry, they're gonna have Fred VanVleet, and they're gonna have Malachi Flynn. Plus, like Norman Powell is a guard slash wing, like depending on what you look at it, they're gonna be pretty stacked in the backcourt. You almost kind of feel like they have to make one extra move after that to kind of maybe get a little bit of depth either at big or at like that combo forward spot.
Yeah, that's why I would agree with you about like if they were going to get Harden, like I'd want PJ Tucker in the deal.
Yeah,
I mean, like you might as well if you're trying to get younger then, and the Raptors are trying to go for another championship. You might as well like why would they need PJ Tucker? You know what I mean?
mm-hmm.
And
Yeah,
like they could get a little bit more out of the deal too if they included PJ Tucker.
yeah, and I think Tucker as well has kind of had problems with the Rockets organization that I think he's ready to move on, just like James Harden is. So I think it just makes sense to kind of package them together, right?
Yeah.
All right.
So basically for Harden though, the teams would be like for like the Celtics, people are saying it's Jaylen Brown.
Mm-hmm.
For the Raptors, it's like Siakam. If it was the Nuggets, it'd be like Porter Jr.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess Jamal Murray. That's like a lot, honestly. If I was the Rockets, I'm taking that in a heartbeat. But
Yeah.
that's why I don't buy that as much because that's like a really good deal.
Mm-hmm. But I mean, you have to think about like what some of the other teams are like throwing in. Like if you're talking about Philly and if you're talking about the fact that they're already willing to give up Ben Simmons, that's pretty much like a top 20, top 15 player that the Rockets are getting. And honestly, I've always thought that Ben Simmons, if you put him in a system where he's surrounded by like it's kind of something similar to like what Giannis has, where he's surrounded by spacing and shooting that like perfectly complements him. I think Ben Simmons has the potential to be like a top 10 player in this league easily. I just think you have to put the right team around him, which I don't think Philly necessarily has in terms of fit. But like if you get, a chance to do that, like if you're Houston and just kind of space the floor around him entirely, I think that to me is honestly probably the best option available, because I think of all the trades that are out there, as much as I like somebody like Siakam too, I think Simmons is probably the best trade chip that anybody else is really offering right now,
Yeah, I mean, like, I feel like a lot of people are sort of forgetting about Siakam because he was, like, all second team.
Yeah.
For, like, the season. He just had, like, a really poor playoffs. I know people love to say about Simmons, like, I like him too, but as a player, but he needs to, like, obviously get a shot. Like, that's, like, an obvious thing that everyone says, but it is kind of true. And Simmons and Wall, that backcourt, it's, like, it lacks a lot of shooting. It has, like, a lot of speed. Like, it'd be, like, one of the fastest backcourts in the league, but...
Yeah.
And playmaking as well, but it'd be an interesting fit.
Yeah, I think that's another scenario where if you're getting Ben Simmons at some point in the season, you're probably moving on from John Wall if you can do it.
If you can.
Yeah, if John Wall plays well enough that some team with a lot of cap space is willing to take a trade on him. Yeah, if like somebody like the Knicks is willing to bite on that trade, and obviously you have Simmons in that scenario, I think you're moving on from John Wall. Honestly, like when it comes to the Raptors, it's tough to like see like if they're gonna pin down Harden. I mean, it's nice to kind of like envision just doing this whole big blockbuster trade and kind of getting like a top 5 superstar on this team, but I feel like there are other options out there for the Raptors that maybe aren't necessarily as like big time as a potential Harden trade, but could still really be valuable for the Raptors in terms of getting them back to like that championship team level.